Ahoy, friends, I am Captain Thomas of the Envisioneer. I assembled a crew of the finest sailors, including you, to sail to an uninhabited island off the coast of Indonesia. We are in search of a well-known historic treasure, guided by an ancient treasure map that was recently discovered. We know it is a risk sailing in the middle of typhoon season, but the crew and I feel confident the benefits will far outweigh the danger. We set out and had calm seas until the day. The weather was stormy, and before long we were caught up in one of the worst storms I've ever seen. All our radios and radar equipment were going haywire as we struggled to stay upright in the water. Suddenly we heard comforting words, "Land ahead!" I struggled to steer the ship toward the island in the distance as the ocean tossed us violently back and forth. Many of the crew were injured or knocked unconscious by falling debris. My first mate and I both suffered deep cuts on our heads from flying ship parts and loose supplies. I directed everyone below deck as we moved closer to the island. Our navigational equipment has been set with the proper coordinates to get us there. As I write this log entry, I feel my consciousness fading.
When I put the water in the powdered sugar, it dissolves. When I put the vinegar in, it does nothing. When I put in the iodine, it kind of changes colors, and it stunk.
When I was experiencing with the cream of tartar, it was very fun because we got to mix it with the iodine, which made it kind of creamy, and it stuck.
When I mixed the baking soda with the water, it dissolved into the water. When I mixed it with the vinegar, it bubbled up, and when I mixed it with the iodine, it dissolved.
When I added iodine to the cornstarch, it turned black. When I added vinegar to the cornstarch, it did nothing. When I added water to the cornstarch, it turned into oobleck. My card. We had to try to figure out what the mystery powder was by analyzing all the tests that we did. The cornstarch showed us that Dr. Smart had part in the crime because he is the only one with cornstarch, and there only we figured out that he is the main criminal of the crime scene.
Right here is a lung diaphragm that we made. Right here we have a lung model that we made to learn about how the lung works. The straw is representing the windpipe going into the lung, which is the balloon. On the bottom, we have the balloon that represents the diaphragm. And when you take a breath of air, the diaphragm pulls down to give room for the lung to expand. And the cup represents the rib cage that protects your lungs and your heart. And the reason we made this model of a lung is because one of our crew members in CSI had a lung that wasn't working. So before we could fix the lung or find out if it was the lung that wasn't working, we needed to learn how the lung works before we could fix it.
During our MBOT building, we had to follow directions to know how to build our MBOT.
We also had lots of parts to build our MBOT and assemble it.
This is when our engineering skills came in handy to build our MBOT.
And it was hard to assemble the robot because all the parts were scattered around.
We had to make the MBOT because we needed to find Neff and Young off the island that they had escaped to.
We are going to be talking about what we learned about the heart. First, we learned about all of the different parts of the heart and how they work. We also learned about all of the different veins in your heart and how the blood pumps through the veins.
Lastly, we learned that the vena cava, the aorta, and the pulmonary veins, and a bunch of other parts work together to pump blood through our hearts. And that's what we learned about the heart.
First thing we had to do was coding. We had to code to bring back Young and Neff. After we coded, we had to build a bridge to help for the CSI.
We had to test to see if the programming worked on our robots, and we had to fix our cables so they didn't run into the walls. I had to check my motor bolts and screws.
Okay.
Now me and Aubrey are going to show a program.
I'll take yours microphone. Did you want to see this? Share this.
Oh. I put copy on my program because I like copy.
Arches only occur in 5% of fingerprints. The ridges of the arch run from one end of the finger to the other end.
Whorls occur in 25 to 35% of fingerprints. The ridges make a turn on them.
Loops occur in 60 to 70% of fingerprints. One or more of the ridges enters on either side of the impression.
You can find fingerprints on a cup with cocoa dust and a brush. The fingerprint matched Dr. Smart, the doctor of the ship.
One of the most common types of whorl fingerprints is the plain whorl, which is an unbroken swirl starting from the center going around.
An ulnar loop is when the loops move toward the smaller finger. A radial loop is when the loops move toward the thumb. And a central loop is when the fingerprint has two loops from different directions.
The model we used for the snake bite was milk and lemon juice, and when they combined together, it got thick just like the blood would.
We learned neurotoxic venom. It affects the blood and the nerves.
Hemotoxic venom affects the blood and the heart.
Keep sight of the bite below the heart.
Remain calm and make sure, if possible, to note the colors and body shape of the snake.
Embolize affected limb with a loose splint.
You also need to remove rings, watches, etc.
Don't cut into snakebite with a razor or a knife.
With this information, we found out which snake bit Cindy Young and cured it.